how one can come from this emotivational state to an intrinsic motivational state and how everything is like connected together. And actually, one can use extrinsic motivation to even induce intrinsic motivation, the different phases. But overall, what is needed in order for intrinsic motivation to exist or come into existence is, according to this theory, these three different, forgetting the term, but basically you need to have a feeling of competence, yeah? So you need to feel that you can master it, that you're good at it, then you're intrinsically motivated. You need to have autonomy, so you need to have the feeling that you're doing it because you want to do it, and you need to be also feeling connected to it, to what you're doing. If these things are harmed, intrinsic motivation can also be crowded out. So in general, like there are like factors which can enhance these different states and also things which can undermine them. And from our perspective, in order to have an effective incentive design, one needs to cater for them, kind of design competence enhancing, autonomy preserving incentives to which people also can relate. Yeah. So and I think crypto has been exploring with a lot of different concepts, things like NFTs and maybe this relatedness. So like one can start philosophizing around it. Okay. So like in order for doing research, we narrowed it a bit more down. So we actually asked the question, what is the impact of multiple blockchain-based tokens on human information sharing behavior? So we went to the context of information sharing and we measured it in quantity, accuracy, and contextualization of the shared information. And I will go now a little bit into detail of this question. So multiple blockchain-based tokens. So actually we had two tokens. One was the money token. So nowadays you can think of it as a stable coin for this experiment. It was pegged to the Swiss franc, and people who earned it during the experiment, they got the Swiss franc paid out after the experiment. And we had a context token, which was more a reputational token. People could earn it, you could not transfer it, but you could use it within the platform for voting, and then it got burned. So it's, kind of, we had these two types of tokens. Then we had the information sharing scenario. So we had a real-world organization, which was the ETH library in Zurich. So we had people like on their phones at home interacting with our app. They shared information with this organization. The organization had an interest in this information, and in exchange, the participants received these two types of tokens. This was like how the experiment looked like. So people were asked questions. For example, would you consider taking part in ETH library image campaign? You could say yes, no, I don't know. We had like 200, 300 of these questions. People could respond, and they could also contextualize their answer. So for example, they could state how satisfied are you with the answer options here. So like kind of also giving meta information on the question, which maybe helps the library further evaluate the responses. And people were paid for every answer. They got a money token. So whenever they answered, they got money. And when they performed the contextualization, they got additionally this context token on top. So this was the setup. And as I said, we measured three types of information characteristics. So one is the amount, like how many answers they gave. So whenever they answered a question. The contextualization, so it's actually this contextualization they could do inside of the app, and the accuracy, which is kind of the weakest measure here, or the disclaimer. So basically we asked some of the question multiple times to the user over the days, and we looked how consistent they answered with the same option. So if someone was just going randomly through it a little bit, try to capture this, like this accuracy aspect. And then we designed a controlled randomized experiment. So we had 132 participants, like roughly 6,000K in Swiss francs for incentives. Had these three phases, so like an onboarding phase, then the core phase, which consisted of 4 days. So on the first day, no one was getting any tokens. On day 2 and day 3, users got tokens. And on day 4, we removed the incentive again and no tokens. And then we had 4 treatment groups, basically all combination. Yeah, a control group getting no tokens, one group only money token, one group only context token, and one group got both tokens. So these 4 groups. And then at the end of the experiment, people were paid, and we had another questionnaire in the end. Okay. Yeah, so like these were the variables we measured. I will not go into the full detail here, but in general, we validated, so like the demographics, like as most studies in this context, we had basically these studies representative for bachelor and master students from a Western European university. So these are like the demographics realm. I think we had like female, male, like roughly on equal terms. We didn't find any bias in the treatment group construction. The rewards were perceived as fair, onboarding material was useful, it was easy to learn the software, so we tried to control that. Basically, it's not the software, the IT was a problem for the participants. And we found that actually these variables which measured, these dependent variables like quantity, contextualization, accuracy, that we had like multi-modality in the data, so it was not normally distributed. So we used Kruskal-Wallis to see if these treatment groups, they differ from each other, and create interaction plots. So I have like in the backup, I have a lot of numbers. I'm not going to show all of these numbers now. I'm going to focus on these interaction plots to talk about the findings a little bit. I think it's the most visual representation. Let's dive into what we have found. So in the end, we call them like these 4 effects, like we had interaction effect, the time effect, internalization effect, and the crowding out effect. So let's start interaction. In general, so like on the day 3, like so this interaction plot, all the plots will be the same. So I will explain it once and then maybe we get a hang of it. It basically, the only important things are these 4 dots, which I tried to color. Yeah, so the lines are not giving you any more information. And we have on the y-axis on top, we have the quantity of shared information. So how much data was shared. On the bottom, the contextualization. So how many contextualization actions people were performing. And then on the y-axis, we have the money token. So basically saying if users received a money token, which would be the plus, like the treatment group, or if they didn't receive a money token, which is a minus. And so and basically the dotted points basically mean there was a context token involved, and the solid line, no context token. So for example, the top dot, which is marked in blue, is basically the money treatment group. Yeah, so basically the money treatment group shared the most information at day 3. So day 3 was the second day with incentives, and we see that money group shares the most data. Though we also notice that the group which received both tokens, the money token and the context token, actually shares less info. And this is significant by the statistical test also. So basically, having just one token, just a money token, people share a lot of info. But as soon as you introduce a second token, which is kind of not related, the amount of info gets less. And if we look now on the contextualization, we see actually that the group who got the context token, they actually created a lot of contextualization. They didn't get any money, but they just did it because of this reputation token, so to say. But as soon as we introduced the money, they stopped with it. Yeah, so like basically this is a both group which received both token incentives, and they share much less than only the context group. But though they are very close, it's still statistical, there's a significance. So like the both group still shared more contextualization than the money group. The money group basically didn't share any context info. Yeah, so they just want to go for the money somehow. And intrinsically, I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's also statistically significant. The context group, like the control group actually shared more than the money group, like in contextualizations. Okay, there is something like a time effect, which was also the weakest signal in the data. But it also went in both directions. I mean, it was just 2 days, like a bit difficult to talk fully about the time effect. But we saw that, for example, here the both group And at day 2, they were still more or less roughly sharing the same amount of info. And at the second day, it only got less. Second day with incentives got less when compared to the money group. So the impact of token incentives can also vary over time. At least as this indicates, of course, there needs to be many more studies probably done to say this more. Yeah, so internalization. So the interesting thing is now, like when you saw before, like the theory, you would assume that after incentives, if they are effective, people would maybe internalize them and be maybe more motivated even after when you remove the incentives. So this is now the day number 4. So we had like before 2 days of incentives, now we have no incentives. And you see that when it comes to the amount of data shared, they're totally similar. So also with the control group. But actually we really found that the context group is, I mean, there's not so much, but they're, I think, statistically significantly different from the money group in shared amount of contextualizations. So we saw a very weak signal that these context token might lead to internalization. The people continued even on the 4th day with contextualization actions. And then this one is like kind of well studied, like this crowding out of incentives, which I think is also like one of the dangers when using incentives in general, because they can crowd out intrinsic motivation and you can have less after the experiment. And here we see this accuracy which we measured, which again was measured over all the 4 days. We see that the groups which received money incentives, they were much less accurate in answering. And yeah, so like this hints to it. At the same time, with the contextualizations, here let's coding out. Not 100% sure. I would need to. Okay, yeah, but I'm okay. I'm going on. Okay, so basically, this is what we found. Conclusions. Last ones I want to do is what we have seen is basically that combining multiple token incentives can produce a more balanced system. If one wants to phrase it positively, in the case where we had both tokens, we had more context sharing and more data sharing in quantity when compared to the control group, but not these extremes. Yeah, so like kind of maybe one could say it's more balanced, which also has been theorized before in some work, so that using a multi-dimensional token system can balance a complex system better. Yeah, so it's like indication for this. Crowding out, we still observe it also with tokens, or this can happen. And in particular, this interaction effect, which I showed at first, at the moment at least, it makes it very difficult to ex ante assess the impact of a token, because we cannot a priori know how tokens will impact the behavior. And then when you combine them, which makes, I would say, purely simulational approaches quite difficult in this context. And it's kind of a call, I would say, for more behavioral cryptoeconomic research, where I'm here today. So like if someone's interested in it, or you're a part of a project and want to collaborate or analyze this a bit more, I would be happy to collaborate. That's from my end. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Questions or comments?
Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask, especially in the blockchain space, all the incentives that ever exist, there's one guy trying to figure out how to make money out of it. Especially social ones. For example, in the age of AI, we have so many agents running around trying to get social credit on social media and then trying to resell. Is it realistic in this day and age to try to give code and context tokens that don't have any monetary value? Because at some point they have some value. They have value in the community, right? So it's never not gameable.
Yes. So the question is like that it could be gamed, yeah, or
yes, there's never not an economic incentive.
So it's always an economic incentive. Yeah, I mean, goes. So basically, like to phrase it differently, if I understand correctly, you're saying like kind of you have like these economic incentives, and because they're economic incentives, then they behave like money, and then they have these negative effects which money also have. Yes, I mean to some extent I see it. Like I comment also in this paper. I think in general the quantification of human behavior, like kind of, and the measuring act itself, can be seen as this extrinsic force for crowding out of intrinsic motivation. And in this sense, one really should ask the normative question if we should quantify everything, because like then you open the door for many different things. Though I would still argue that you could design tokens differently. I mean, objectively you can do it, and you can, for example, make them non-transferable. And you have like these parallels to history for different forms of money which existed. They had like these waystones, for example, which was like kind of like reputation maybe, but you could not really use it for daily commerce. And in this sense, you can create a reputation which forms as function as a store of value, and maybe motivates differently than a purely money form, which may be used as a medium of exchange. Yeah.
Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for the presentation. Following question is quite a bit of a stretch, but please bear with me. So, especially in the literature on prediction markets, there there are arguments that there are specific incentives to be made for people to share information, right? So, like in particular cases, it makes sense to incentivize people or to subsidize those markets. So I was wondering if there are parallels to what you've been doing here. And the argument in prediction market is that if there is a sufficiently large enough network of interactions, you don't have to subsidize. So the question would be, do you see something else happening here? Like, for example, if the network is mature, or if there is kind of like a big enough community, you don't really, you can, get rid of those incentives.
I mean, from this study, I think I cannot generalize to that. I think, like, I mean, yeah, like I mean, we had like a philosophical discussion with this multi-dimensional token system. Like, I was part of the research group, and also like my research was settled in. And I think like in some extreme form, if you have like a large dimensional space, maybe it doesn't matter too much, and when you then start to internalize them, at some point you overcome it, and then you don't need it. So like in these words, like you have network effect, and then you have like from the self-determination theory, kind of you feel related to the community, like connected enough, and you have this feeling of expertise and mastery. You might just share voluntarily because you're just good at it and you have fun and joy. I definitely see this from the theory point of view. From this research, which is the only first step, I think I cannot really support this claim yet.
Any other questions? If not, then a round of applause. Thanks, Mark, again. And we'd like to close the day with a panel discussion. And in fact, this should be a conversation. So bear with us, come closer while we are setting up the stage. This one will be about the cost of entry, why we are organizing TERS, what's our motivations, what we have been observing in this space, research versus practitioners, rigor versus speed. Yeah, join the discussion. I'd like to ask